Thanks. Get the first slide. Hey, everybody. So this is it's a photograph by Michael Najar, a German artist. And this is of Patagonia, and it's a real photograph. I mean, he went there. He actually took the time and the enormous effort. But it's also been extensively altered digitally. And he's gone in and carefully reworked it so that all the contours of those mountains are actually mapped to the vicissitudes of the Dow Jones Index, right? So this is a perfect map of the stock market. That high precipice up there is right before the big crash in 2008, and I guess we live somewhere right around here now. I'm not quite sure how high up that is. And of course, it's not just there. This is the Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong, which is a very similar topography. I wonder why. And, you know, this is art. This is metaphor. But I want to propose today that this is basically a kind of metaphor with teeth. And it's through those teeth that I want to suggest that this is a moment to kind of rethink and reevaluate the role that math plays in our life, and actually a very specific type of math. Contemporary form of mathematics, algorithms, which put most simply are the types of math that computers use to make decisions. And to propose that math used to be something that we sort of derived and extracted from the world, and that it's shifted to something that we're sort of using to impose and shape the world that's around us and the world that's inside us, and that these kinds of algorithms, when they get repeated over and over and over again, they kind of calcify and they ossify and they kind of become this real. And I was sort of first thinking about this on an airplane a couple years ago. I happened to be sitting next to a Hungarian physicist who told me kind of an amazing story. I asked him, what did Hungarian physicists do during the Cold War? Because this is usually a very interesting question. And he said, well, I was working on stealth aircraft technologies, which is interesting because there were no stealth technologies in the Soviet Union or in Hungary at that time. And I said, so how does that work? And he said, well, we weren't making stealth, we were breaking it. I said, well, how'd that work? Because that wasn't really supposed to happen. And he said, well, first you'd have to understand how stealth works. And so I'm going to oversimplify greatly here and say that basically the way that stealth technologies work, these airplanes that remain invisible when they fly, is that there's basic physics. You can't just take a radar signal and pass it through 150 tons of steel. There's some basic physics in the way. But if you can take the big thing, if you can take that huge aircraft, and if you can break it up, as far as a radar is concerned, into a million little things, like a flock of birds, it means that if you're a radar, you've got to be looking for every single little bird in the sky. And if you're a radar, that's a really, really bad job. Right? And he said, yeah, but that's if you're a radar. And he said, so we didn't use radar. What we did was we looked for electrical signals moving through the sky. And if we saw an electrical signal moving through the sky and it had no radar signature, we knew that probably has something to do with the Americans. And that's a fair assumption. And I said, so that's great. So you negated and eliminated 60 years of aeronautic research by the Americans. What's your act two? Like, where do you go from there? Like, what do you do when you grow up? And he said, well, financial services. And I said, oh, financial services, because those have been in the news lately. And I said, so what do physicists do over on Wall Street? What's the kind of black box on Wall Street? He said, well, yeah, there's about 2,000 physicists on Wall Street. And he said, and it's funny because actually we call it black box trading. It's just like the black boxes we made to detect the aircraft. We use them here on Wall Street. And he said, the deal is that a big institutional trader, if you're like a big bank or something, you have the same problem that the United States Air Force used to have. So you engage in what's called algo trading, and you're doing basically the same thing that stealth aircraft did, which is to take, when you're going to move 1 million shares of something, let's say Procter & Gamble, you're going to move 1 million shares through the market, and it's just like an aircraft. You can't let that be seen because then everybody knows exactly what you're doing. So they use algorithms and they break it up, and they break up 1 million shares into a lot of little shares, and they move that through the market in a kind of financial camouflage. And it's quite clever. And then the kind of horror and beauty of it is that, of course, the same mathematics that you use to break up the million things into all the little things are the same mathematics that you use to detect it. Okay? So if you need an image of what the stock market looks like right now, 70% of it, 70% of all stocks traded in the United States are traded algorithmically. They are traded through this kind of math. What could go wrong in this, of course, is that you get what's called the flash crash. The flash crash was in 2010, and it is the sort of the inevitable result of this type of behavior. It's what happens when the complexity of the stock market itself starts to outpace our ability to even understand it. When we start to actually write things that we can't read. So what happens is in 2010 is that the stock market loses 9% of its volume. 9% of the entire stock market goes away in 5 minutes. That's why it was called the crash of 245. All of a sudden, there's just nothing. Like 9% of it disappears, and nobody authorized it. Nobody said that that's what they wanted to happen. It's just what happened. And this is sort of the inevitable consequence of writing the unreadable. That what we've done collectively is to start to author things that we can no longer collectively read. We've made something that's invisible and illegible to us ourselves. And there's a few people who are sort of working on this problem of this thing that we've made collectively. There's a group of data scientists up in Chicago who can actually reach into the market, and they can sort of see what's happening in there, and they can, when they find an algorithm, they pull it out. They pull it out and they say, okay, they can identify it, and they say, okay, we'll give it what we've always done, which is a story and a name. Right? Just like constellations in the sky. So they pull these out, they don't know who put them there, they don't know what they're doing, but when they pull them out, they give them a story and a name. So this one they call the knife, the carnival, the Boston shuffler, Twilight. But the gag is that the knife and the Boston shuffler, they're not just working their way through the markets. They actually move through culture itself. So look here. So this is a book about flies. It's a used book about the genetics of flies. And this appeared on Amazon. I don't know if you noticed it. It was on sale for a little while for about $1.7 million. And it's a used book. It is out of print, but you can still agree that that's a lot. But if you had bought it then, you would have been doing yourself a great favor, because it was about 2 hours later that it reached $23 million. Okay? And what you see in this is exactly what you see in Wall Street. It's exactly what you see in the flash crash, which is the unsupervised behavior of a bunch of algorithms that are locked in a loop, a bunch of algorithms that are sort of seeking each other out without any actual adult oversight, without any supervision, without any humans there to say that this is what's happening, and to say that probably $1.7 million is plenty to begin with. And it's the same thing with Netflix. Netflix is using these to actually detect what movies it is that you want to watch, right? So these are it's called a pragmatic chaos algorithm, and this is actually setting out to determine what movie do you want to watch next. And that seems benign until you realize that this is being used by 60% to determine 60% of all the movies that are watched by 20 million people, that come out of the set of mathematics that say, this is probably what you want, right? This is a very different world. And the question is like, okay, if you take that a little bit further and you say, well, what if it wasn't about the movie you're going to watch, but about the movie that we're going to make? And so you've got these guys at Epigogics, which is a bunch of London quants who came to Hollywood to do for the movie industry what they've done for the market. And you can feed in your story algorithm, right? You can feed in the story, and it will actually process that algorithmically to tell you whether this movie is going to be a $20 million movie, a $100 million movie, or a $500 million movie. And the thing is that this isn't Google, this isn't finance, it's not information, this is culture. And what you see in this, are kind of the physics of culture. And when these algorithms crash, like they did on Wall Street, the question is, how would we know? We'd just be watching a bunch of crappy movies. And they work their way into your home. These are two different cleaning robots, right? These are like vacuuming robots that are very popular. And you can see that these are they're trying to do the same thing, but you can see that they have very different ideas about your home. And these are kind of like the secret architects, who have ideas about your bedroom. Right? And this kind of algorithmic optimization, you can feel it in particular, if you want to go further, the minute you step into what's called a destination control elevator. And a destination control elevator is an elevator where you tell it what floor you're going to go to before you get in. You've seen these maybe, where instead of saying, okay, well, we'll just let everybody into whatever car they want, and this one goes to 4, and this one goes to 14, you just type it in to begin with, and we'll sort them. We'll sort everybody into that. And the only problem with that is that people get into that and they panic, because this is what it looks like inside. And you can see that there's a couple things missing in this elevator, like buttons, right? Like buttons. And so all there is just a number, a monitor that changes numbers, and then a big red button that says stop. And this is what happens when you start to build in a kind of machine dialect. And if you actually sort of want to really feel that in a meaningful way, you'd have to travel back to Wall Street, back to Manhattan, and you'd see that, in fact, algorithms have their own neighborhoods. They have their own desires. They have a single criterion, and that criterion is speed. They need to be faster than you can possibly imagine. And they measure things in milliseconds and microseconds. And if you're 500 milliseconds behind, you're just a total loser on Wall Street. And the problem in this is that information takes time to travel, right? Even if it's just 10 blocks, it really takes time. It's not a human perceivable time, but it takes time. And that means that these guys down on Wall Street who are running these algorithms are basically in a lot of trouble. And what you really want to do is get close to the internet itself. And you think of the internet as this sort of widely distributed system, et cetera, but the truth is that it's just a bunch of wires. It's distributed from places. In Manhattan, it's distributed right here in what's called a carrier hotel, which is uptown a little bit. And it means that if you're running algorithms and you really want them to work, you've got to actually locate them right up there, right? So algorithms begin to have their own neighborhoods that are built on this sort of natural resource of speed, and architects are sort of hollowing out buildings and taking out all the furniture, all the stuff that people used to use, and they're putting in steel for this, sort of stacks of servers. And the reason for this is it's an economic rationale, because all of you, pound for pound and inch for inch and dollar for dollar, could never squeeze the same revenue out of the room that Twilight can, that the Boston Shuffler can. But that's not even the big picture. If you were to zoom all the way out, you'd see that there's an 825-mile trench between New York and Chicago, a trench that was dug just for one wire to go between those two cities, just to carry this one signal that no human will ever know or read. And all of that just to carry a signal 37 times faster than a mouse click to bypass the internet. And all of that just for these algorithms, just for the carnival, just for the knife. And when you realize, when you consider that we're sort of running dynamite and rock saws to blast through the United States, all so that an algorithm can close the deal in Chicago 3 milliseconds faster, you realize that this is sort of manifest destiny. This is manifest destiny looking for its next frontier, and fortunately, we have our work cut out for us. This is planetary scale computing architectures for electronic trading, done by a couple of mathematicians at MIT, and this involves all kinds of really complex stuff like quantum entanglement and light cones and stuff that I totally don't understand, but I can read this map. And what this map says is that if you're like a person in one of these red places where the cities are, and you want to trade with the other cities, you're going to have to use a server that is in one of those blue places to get that as fast as possible. And the thing that you'll notice immediately is that a lot of those blue places are in the middle of the ocean, right? And we'll solve that somehow. We'll build bubbles or platforms, or somehow we will figure out how to part the water to pull the money out of the air, because it's a bright future if you're an algorithm. The thing is that it's not the money that's actually the amazing part. It's what the money motivates. It's the idea of terraforming the earth, of actually changing the earth with this kind of algorithmic efficiency. And if you think about that, and you return in this light back to Najar's mountains, shaped by the Dow Jones, you realize that this is no metaphor at all, that this is prophecy, right? That this is a prophecy for the sort of seismic and tectonic effects of the math that we've made, and that the landscape has always been shaped by nature and by man, and that it now has this kind of third co-evolutionary force, which is to say algorithms, and that we'll have to understand those as nature, because in a way, they are. Thanks.